Hiya, I'm Azaman, and Persona 3 Reloaded has come out and this video has been delayed by quite a bit. But here we are now, so let's talk about Persona 3 things, specifically the movies, because they are actually pretty damn good. Released between 2013 and 2016, the movies cover the entire journey of Persona 3, while also making a few narrative changes. Some for the better, and some for the worst, I feel. However, I don't want to talk about those differences. Instead, I want to discuss the hero of these films, a Mr. Makoto Yuki, the blue-haired boy. I want to talk about him because across these 4 films, he grows as a character, and by the end, he is nearly unrecognizable because of how drastically he has changed. For the better. Here in the movies, his development is on full display, whereas in the original game, Persona 3 FES, I am currently still playing through Reload, the protagonist does have some subtle character development and personality, but it's in kind of a Byleth 3 Houses scenario, where it's missable and people will say they had no personality and development. But that's wrong. Ahem, that is not the point of this video, so why don't we dive into Makoto Yuki by first explaining that this video will naturally feature major Persona 3 spoilers for the entire story. But if you don't care about that, then please enjoy the video. So without further ado, allow me to present you with Persona 3 the movie, Spring of Birth. One of the most notable things about Makoto right from the get-go is that he actually has a voice outside of combat. In the movie, he is voiced by Akira Ishida, the same Japanese voice actor from the original game, and also the same guy in Persona 3 Reloaded. That is pretty sick.
Takaba, would you mind showing him to his room?
What?
This is Yukari Takaba. She'll be a second year this spring, the same as you.
I'm Takaba.
Yuki Makoto. It's nice to meet you.
Same here. It's nice to meet you.
However, the clip I played just now was clearly in English, so where is that from? Well you see, a couple years ago some Persona 3 fans got together and tried to make a fan dub of the movies. They only managed to dub the first movie in English, but that movie is honestly pretty solid. The dub is decent, I enjoy it. So for the first movie at least, please enjoy the performance of Kiramaru XVI as Makoto Yuki. I know that is 16, but I don't actually have a reason. Link to this fan dub is in the description below. When we meet Makoto in the first movie, he is very much dead inside. He lacks ambition or direction. And one of the first changes in the plot is that we learn Makoto has always experienced the Dark Hour. At least for as long as he could remember. And I believe that because of this, it naturally isolated him from his peers no matter where he went. Early on, we learned that Makoto was an orphan who bounced around from place to place, distant relative to distant relative. That part is true for all the games. However, these 2 common occurrences in his life naturally led to Makoto becoming a shell of a person. He walks through life without care or drive and holds no value for his life. In a word, he's apathetic. When the first full moon shadow attacks, Yukari, like in the games, tries to escort Makoto to safety. In the games, the protagonist follows her and runs behind her, showing value and concern for his own life. Here in the movies, Makoto is dragged along by Yukari. She pulls him forward. There comes to a point where they stop moving because Makoto catches a glimpse of the moon. Throughout the scene, Makoto is not afraid nor frantic. When he stops to look at the moon, Yukari chastises him, telling him this.
Snap out of it! Our lives are in danger. Do you want to die?
Does it matter?
Huh?
Is dying really that frightening?
Yuki-kun.
Blatantly, he has no care for his life or Yukari, despite the danger. When the full moon shadow tries to attack him, Makoto doesn't flinch, he doesn't move, forcing Yukari to save him. From there, she drags Makoto up to the roof for safety, where she is then bested and knocked aside by the shadow. Here in the scene where he picks up his evoker, we can see that Makoto is not heartless. He's not a horrible person. He possesses the innate desire to do good, but acting on that desire is difficult. However, when he sees Yukari injured and is truly faced with mortality, Faced with the possibility of seeing someone die, he has a flash of a memory. He sees a bloody body in a car crash, and something in him just clicks.
Nah.
He doesn't want to watch someone die or get hurt. He is not heartless, he can show concern, but he doesn't know how. However, he does know how to kick the full moon shadow's ass. Securing the W, he then falls unconscious and wakes up in a hospital bed with Yukari looking over him. She tries apologizing for how she failed to protect him, and Makoto's response is pretty tactless. He tells her not to worry, he didn't need her help, or in the original Japanese version, he says something along the lines of, "I wasn't counting on you," which naturally makes Yukari a little upset for reasons that Makoto doesn't understand. In that moment, he was just being honest. Following this, like in the original games, Makoto is offered a position in SEES, an organization dedicated to ending the shadow threat and finding a way to stop the Dark Hour. Makoto agrees to join SEES, but no particular reason for his joining is given. Makoto doesn't even think it over. When he's given the offer, he just says, "Very well," only agreeing because the option was presented before him. And this is not me looking into it, it's pointed out later in the film that Makoto has no real reason for joining. While he does have a desire for good, Makoto is not altruistic. He joined, and he himself doesn't know why he even did it. His joining has no meaning. Though, later on, Makoto will give it meaning. The lack of care or direction Makoto has is highlighted in Tartarus, where we see how he fights, and he fights recklessly, throwing himself into the thick of things with little regard for himself or the harm he may take. Why? He just doesn't care. These scenes paint Makoto as blunt, apathetic, and socially unaware, but a good person at his core. Stepping away from the shadow conflict, let's dial it back and focus on an interaction he had with Fuka, and this interaction helps characterize and cement Makoto's arc in this film. There are two instances where Fuka has her books knocked over, and each time, Makoto goes to help her. The first time, he helps pick up her books because he happens to be walking in the direction of Fuka. He stops, picks up her books, and leaves without a word, not even hearing her thank him. He did this because she happened to be in his way. He was drifting through life. The second time, however, takes place after the full moon shadow. Here, he steps out of the bookstore and is about to walk to the left when he hears Fuka being bullied. He observes it, and when her things get knocked over, he makes the conscious choice to actively approach Fuka and help her. Then they get together and Makoto asks Fuka why she cares about the friend who's bullying her. And Fuka says that she cares because she is afraid of her friend's well-being. That means she has to care. Makoto doesn't really understand, and he spends the night pondering this. This occurs about a third of the way through the movie, but it shows that Makoto is finally showing ambition in something. He wants to learn. From here, lots of slice of life stuff occurs, and there's plenty of interaction with the rest of the cast, but while I love them, I love Makoto more, and I am here to discuss him solely. So let's focus on two key events from this film, the following full moon shadows that appear in May and June. During the May full moon operation, the monorail one, the one where this song plays, at least in the original, here Makoto is formally dubbed the SEES Field Commander, which Junpei, this guy, naturally takes issue with. Junpei wants to be the guy in charge, and he doesn't take too kindly to Makoto's leadership, though Makoto really isn't much of a leader. His leadership here basically boils down to, I'll walk in front. He doesn't give commands, he's intent on letting people do as he sees fit. Case in point, when they finally board the monorail and Junpei runs off on his own, saying he can handle the full moon shadow on his own, Makoto just lets him. Not out of malice, but out of naivety. He could not comprehend that a person would lie to him or not be able to keep his word. He doesn't understand social cues, which in turn does repaint a lot of his meaner moments in this film. He is not trying to be rude. He just doesn't know any other way to communicate, and because of this, he's not really able to work well with others. Think back to what he said to Yukari.
Don't worry about it.
Huh?
I really didn't need your help.
What?
Still, he chases after Junpei once Yukari tells him that they can't let Junpei go off on his own because he is their partner. Then, during the proper confrontation with the second full moon shadow, this thing that I thought was kinda hot when I first played P3, Makoto is able to grow throughout this battle. Here he is once again confronted by the possibility of death. Not his own death, but the possibility of another person dying in front of him. Junpei in this case, who after seeing the situation as hopeless since the shadow is too strong, recklessly charges the shadow in a fruitless attack that will certainly lead to his demise. Makoto springs into action, though not in an emotional way. He doesn't scream or call out. He reaches to grab Junpei and stays calm, focusing and making a plan. By using a persona he had recently acquired, he is able to nullify the shadow's attacks. He then puts his trust in his team, having them finish the shadow off, finally working with another person, demonstrating that he can be a good leader. In moments of extreme stress, he can keep a level head and ground others. Following this, more slice of life occurs with Makoto tagging along each time for no real reason. Yukari theorizes that Makoto tagged along because he's lonely, which seems accurate. Moving on to the June full moon operation. Fuka has gone missing after being locked in the school by her friend/bullies. This results in Fuka being displaced in both time and space for a week, though she only experiences like 8 hours of it. P3 is a weird sometimes. During the search, Cease is trying to piece all of this information together. Makoto is once again just there. He's in the background as Akihiko and Mitsuru do the legwork. He doesn't really appear to care about Fuka, but he agrees to tag along on the most dangerous part of the operation to save her. During this meeting, we see Akihiko and Yukari explain why they help people. They do it because they can. They have reasons for why they are willing to risk their lives in seas, which Makoto does not have. And this lack of a reason boils over as Yukari chastises Makoto, telling him,
I can't guarantee your safety, but I hope we can count on you.
I understand.
Do you really understand?
What's gotten into you, Yuka-tan?
That goes for Yamagishi as well. Even I want to save her. But you don't care. If you don't have a reason to fight, then don't. That side of you really makes me mad.
Very well.
Hey, what do you mean by very well? Hey, Makoto, wait up, dude!
though shortly afterwards she does explain this to Junpei.
Don't you think you're a little hard on him, Yuka-tan?
I'm afraid. I'm afraid for him. If he keeps fighting with no resolve for himself, he's going to get himself killed someday.
And with that, Makoto does not join Cease for the operation. He stays in the dorm, staring at his evoker, pondering what Yukari said, but he just can't wrap his head around it. Until Pharos, the ghost boy, appears. Pharos informs Makoto that on this night there will be another ordeal like the previous full moon shadows. Pharos asks Makoto if he is sure that he shouldn't have gone, to which Makoto replies,
I don't know.
Cutting to Cease, Akihiko and Junpei have rescued Fuka, but once they regroup with Mitsuru and Yukari, they discover that not one, but two full moon shadows has emerged. Cease attempts to engage the monsters, but they can't seem to nail down the weaknesses of the shadows. One by one, each of them falls. Not even Fuka awakening to her persona can save them because her persona isn't suited for combat. She is the last one left standing. Mitsuru, Akihiko, Junpei, and Yukari are down. They can only watch. The situation is hopeless until a hero emerges.
Morpheus! Morpheus?
But why?
There he goes, showing up and hogging all the glory, you bastard.
However, it's not enough. Makoto alone can't solo these two shadows. Though, before we continue, let's rewind back a little. How did Makoto get here, and why? He previously said he would stay at the dorm. Cutting back to his conversation with Pharos, Pharos went on to explain that if Makoto doesn't do anything, then everyone will die. At that statement, Makoto sees, or remembers something. He has another flash of this car crash, along with the sound of a woman screaming. It plays in his mind, and Makoto shivers. To that, he can only say,
They'll die.
showing actual concern, because now death is once again a possibility. Pharos asks what Makoto will do, causing Makoto to emote. He clenches his fist and looks defiantly at the moon, gaining resolve. Earlier I stated that Makoto fights recklessly, and that is especially true in what follows. Him riding on this motorcycle epitomizes this. And when the fight appears to be utterly hopeless, Makoto continues to rally himself, even against the wishes of Seize, who tell Makoto to take Fuka and run. If he runs now, he'll survive. They might die, but he'll save Fuka, and that's what matters. Mitsuru even demands it, calling it in order. And for the first time in the film, Makoto actively rebukes an order. Previously, every time Mitsuru or anyone told Makoto to do anything, he listened and followed, typically by responding with the word, understood. But this time, he says nothing. He still has trouble communicating, but he has chosen to make a stand. He will not abandon them to die. He can't put these feelings into words, but his actions can speak for him, and he resolutely refuses to leave, futilely fighting on. This display manages to rally Seize and Fuka back to their feet, and by working together, they manage to just barely secure the W. From there, the film wraps up with a shot of Makoto finally smiling for the first time, bringing his development to a close as Makoto has opened his heart. He is willing to make connections and attempt to speak his mind, though more importantly, Makoto has an idea, a vague idea of what he is fighting for. It is not something grand or altruistic like saving the world. Instead, it's selfish. He wants to protect the people of Seize. He has grown to care about them. He cannot stand the thought of any of them dying. He is willing to fight as recklessly as possible, if that is what it takes to protect his friends. And this newfound mentality continues to develop off-screen as we now jump to the second movie. Persona 3, the movie, MidSummer Night's Dream. The movie's cold opening establishes that in the month since the previous film, Seize has begun to function like a proper team, with Makoto as an actual leader. He now takes a more forward role, having grown more accustomed to social interaction. For starters, he speaks in a more casual tone, referring to people by their first name. And I need to mention that we are now in the no English mode. Yeah, only the first movie got the fan dub treatment, so the remaining 3 films shall be in that foreign moon speak. Back to the film, Seize manages to defeat the full moon shadow. It's not that important. After most of the early portion, the film has the cast embark on the beach episode at Yakushima, and this section of the film is an absolute joy to watch, because Makoto is genuinely so happy hanging out with everyone. Just look at him with this crab! His body language in general here is more approachable. And tangent, but I need to mention that the adaptation of the stupidly named Operation Babe Hunt is stupidly fun and pretty funny. because all three of our lads are like, huh, what are guys supposed to do? Girls. Okay, sure. Let's try hitting on girls. Wait, how do we do that? None of them are good at it. Cause that's not who they are. It's stupid. It looks stupid. It's hijinks. But this stupid hijinks that Makoto voluntarily agrees to join in with a level of eagerness is great. It's a little jarring because he's different from the first movie, but I like it. He's happy. I'm happy for him. This is a natural evolution of his character from the first film, because while he is still more outgoing, Makoto is still pretty socially awkward, which is best evident in how he typically initiates conversation, where he'll just say something out of pocket that doesn't seem relevant. This is especially evident after the big Dark Hour exposition dump via Mitsuru's father, who reveals that the cause of the Dark Hour was by an experiment conducted by the Kirijo group, an experiment that was facilitated by Yukari's father. This revelation has Yukari run out, to which Makoto pursues her after the rest of C's implores him to go. He finds Yukari outside, crying, and she's lamenting the fact that her father caused the Dark Hour. She bares her heart to Makoto and says that her joining C's was all for nothing. And Makoto says this to her: "It might have not meant anything to you, but it meant something to me. When I'm with you and the others, I never get bored. So I don't think it's all bad. It can even be fun. Don't you think?" This line is very telling of Makoto's feelings towards scenes, and it's kind of a thesis for his character for the next two movies. Following that, they get swarmed by shadows and are saved by Aegis, who looks really naked without her bow. Censor that. Ahem. C's regroups and they learn that if they defeat every large shadow that appears on a full moon, the Dark Hour should come to an end, giving them all a goal to work towards, which excites everyone except Makoto. Makoto instead has a look of shock and quietly says, "Only 6 left?" A fear has overtaken Makoto. He is afraid of losing the friends he just made, because once the Dark Hour goes away, will any of them have a reason to hang out with each other? All of them are even in the same dorm because of C's. Once the Dark Hour is gone, C's will have no reason to exist, and the thought of this instills Makoto with fear. Think back to what he said to Yukari. It meant something to him. He actually likes the Dark Hour because it's the only way he can hang out with his friends, which is honestly crazy relatable, right? Because think about how hard it is to grow friendships that are born from sharing a niche interest, especially when you have next to no social skills. It's scary. Let's keep moving. The story shifts focus to Ken and Shinji for a bit, because they are the real stars of this film, and that's not me joking. I adore the dynamic these two characters have in only this film, but we are not talking about them despite how badly I want to, because this video will already be long enough. Ahem. In the last movie, I made mention of how Makoto fought recklessly, throwing himself into the thick of danger because he didn't care about himself, but now he has a reason. He does so for the sake of his friends, and he's even developed a sense of pride in his abilities, and is even itching to use them, as evident in him showing up to Ken, and here where he's got the evoker. Furthermore, he is far more attentive and proactive now too. Let's check out this scene. When the tank emerges from the lower level, yeah, there's a tank. This is 2 of the full moon shadows. Don't ask questions, go play the game, or check out these films. They are on YouTube. When the tank rises, Makoto dashes into position and is ready to throw down alongside Akihiko, while the rest of C's are just stunned. And in terms of expressiveness, we really get to see that here with Makoto, where once Aigis is about to be killed, he cries out her name and desperately reaches out towards her. This is very different when compared to the first movie, where people were in danger, like Junpei about to throw his life away, or the desperate battle against the Full Moon Shadows in Tartarus. Makoto in those scenarios never called out to anyone. He stayed silent. But now, after growing, he is actively yelling. He is showing emotion. What I'm trying to get at here is this. Makoto is only expressive during the Dark Hour, when he's fighting alongside C's. That's when he feels good. That's when he has fun. It's when he feels alive. Anyway, Shinji has a badass entrance and Makoto secures the W. Continuing off what I just said, shortly after there's another instance of Makoto expressing his unease towards the eventual defeat of the Dark Hour. Here, after school with Junpei, Fuka, and Yukari, Makoto asks, "Hey, wanna go to Tartarus today?" Causing Fuka to remark, "We've been going there every day lately." And Yukari chimes in, "And it's not like there's any reason to go, right? I mean, once we defeat the 4 remaining shadows, it'll all be over." Which shakes Makoto to his core. He stands there motionless, trying to process this, while Fuka and Yukari move on to a different topic, discussing wearing yukatas for the upcoming festival, where Makoto then interrupts with trepidation in his voice, asking, "What's gonna happen when it's all over?" Fuka replies that everyone will go back to their normal lives, but that's not the answer to the question Makoto was asking. He wanted to know if they were all going to stay friends or not. He wanted to know what would happen to their group, and he doesn't get an answer to this question. Ken shows up and the conversation topic shifts. Also, I want to take a look at the shot composition here. Notice how Junpei, Fuka, and Yukari are all in the bright, colorful sun. They are covered in bright, warm colors that are a bit oversaturated, like when they were at the beach. Meanwhile, Makoto is in shadow, his upper body at least. He's still standing at the entrance of the school, which is the entrance to Tartarus. When the camera zooms in on him, the lighting is much darker and gloomy looking. It's visualizing the growing disconnect between Makoto and Seize. They are fighting to end the Dark Hour, while he's fighting to spend time with them. Also, as a side note, I want to mention this is the most colorful film out of the Persona 3 movies. The rest, especially the third one and most of the fourth one, are darker and gloomier. The events of this film are pretty much the golden days of Seize. And I mean it, because come on, with scenes like this, this is when everyone is at their happiest, which, well, as Persona 3 tells us, all will eventually reach the same end. It doesn't last forever, which is Makoto's exact fear, and it comes to a head during the September full moon operation, where after Seize defeats the Big Shadow, Makoto quietly, and almost sounding kind of defeated, says, "It'll all be over soon, huh?" And that small phrase starts to fracture Seize, because everyone is caught off guard by it. Shinji demands to know what Makoto meant by that. Did Makoto mean that he wants the shadows and the Dark Hour to persist? Shinji demands an answer. He grabs Makoto by the collar, and Makoto doesn't respond to any of the accusations, which is paramount to admitting, yes, that's exactly what he wants. It puts distance between him and everyone. Then, when the next full moon rolls around, Makoto resolves to go ahead and face it, but his heart isn't quite in it. He's conflicted. He doesn't want the Dark Hour to end, but he wants to protect his friends. There's some pushback on whether or not he should go, but Mitsuru ultimately allows him to join because, I haven't really gotten into this, but Makoto and Mitsuru don't really have much of a relationship in this film. They seldom interact, but Mitsuru across every film has shown the most confidence and faith in Makoto. She trusts in his strength and believes that he will always come through. And I believe this is because Mitsuru sees a lot of herself in Makoto, and that's not just in their hairstyles. Also, I need to mention that by this point in the films, it's recognized that Makoto is easily the strongest out of everyone in Seize. Barring Aigis, of course. So bringing him in is a good idea, regardless. When the battle with the October full moon shadow begins, Makoto is very much out of it. He's not fighting like he was earlier in the film, where he was protective fierce, and the first to act. Instead, he's slower, he's not taking the initiative. For the most part, he just stands around in a daze, and has difficulty pulling the trigger on his evoker. That has never happened, but it happened here in the middle of the fight. Makoto raised his evoker, and then lowered it, right when he had the opportunity to finish the shadow off. And I need to mention that at this time, Seize is on a time crunch because Shinji and Ken have both gone missing. Fuka senses that they are together, and everyone knows that Ken is likely trying to kill Shinji for killing his mother. The moment of hesitation that Makoto displays here is absolutely brutal because of its ramifications. Once Yukari, Junpei, and Koromaru are beaten down, Makoto has no other choice but to get his head back in the game. In the most dire moment, he begrudgingly chooses to protect his friends and secures the W. This allows everyone to rush to Shinji and Ken's location, only to arrive too late. In this rendition of Persona 3, it is most certainly Makoto's fault for Shinji's death. Had he not hesitated and defeated the Shadow when he had the chance, it is more than likely that Seize would have arrived in time to save Shinji. And I know this isn't the ultimate Persona 3 movie retrospective, but the way the film cuts between the battle with the Fortune Arcana Shadow and Ken's confrontation with Shinji and later Takaya is so good. Like, really good. Ken is a wonderful character in this film, and so is Shinji. Ahem. The film concludes with the school memorial for Shinji. The scene is quiet, and students can be heard gossiping about Shinji, spreading rumors, and showing a cold, uncaring reaction about his death. Makoto, though, sits in the auditorium, quietly, and the final shot of the film is this. Makoto, in this instance, has come face to face with the reality of death. Across these two films, he has always sprung into action to save someone's life. But this time, the one time he didn't, the one time he hesitated, someone died. Shinji died. Persona 3, the movie, Falling Down. Picking up 1 month after Shinji's death, the cold opening here is Seize engaging the final full moon shadow and Strega. These three, Takaya, Jin, and Chidori. They are the human antagonists from the games, and I'm not really gonna get into them because they don't really matter for Makoto's development. They are kind of a nuisance that routinely appears. But know that it was Takaya, this shirtless Jesus looking man right here, who killed Shinji. But also, Chidori is important. Her and Junpei are honestly a future video, so maybe. Ahem. So, for the duration of this fight, Makoto spends it laying on his back. He was hit by an attack and knocked down, but he's not really injured. Instead, he's just struggling to find the will to fight. As he lies on the floor, he has a long conversation with Pharos, the ghost boy that's in his head, reflecting on his emotions and conflict. Makoto naturally blames himself for Shinji's death. He wants to push past it, but it's too painful. He doesn't want to ever lose anyone again, but at the same time, he doesn't ever want to risk anyone dying because of him. However, that's stupid. If he does nothing, people he cares about will die anyway. He needs to act. Makoto knows this, and he finds the resolve in that moment to get back up, because in this instant he knows it may be the last time he gets to fight alongside everyone. He rejoins the battle, and secures the W, like always, while Takaya and Jin, these two, jump off the bridge. Meanwhile, Pharos, the ghost boy, ominously mentions that something called the Fall will soon occur, and that he will now be leaving Makoto. He walks away. Makoto tries to reach out to him, but he can't. Pharos is gone. With the final full moon shadow defeated, the Dark Hour seemingly comes to an end, and Seas will be disbanded. Everyone in Seas is ecstatic about this, and they quickly begin planning a celebration party the next day. Everyone hands in their evokers, experiencing the thrill of victory, while Makoto on the other hand is experiencing a Pyrrhic victory, because while no one did die, it's more than likely that everyone will now leave him. At least, that's how he sees it. The party starts the next day, and Seas is goofing around, calling dibs on food and enjoying their victory, except for Mr. Makoto Yuki. He mills around on the edge of the party and eventually decides to leave before it really begins, claiming that he's not feeling well, which is an improvement. Makoto from the prior two films would have said nothing and walked away. Even though he's currently regressing, he still retains some of his growth. Makoto spends the night sitting in his room, alone, waiting for midnight to pass, in order to confirm that the Dark Hour is truly gone. However, plot happens. Aegis is controlled and all of Seas are taken hostage and crucified on top of Tartarus. Well, not on top of Tartarus, they're on a roof lip on one of Tartarus' lower levels. Why are they there? Because Ikutsuki, haha lame funny pun man here, is not a nice person. He was the chairman in charge of Seas, but he was never there to actually end the Dark Hour. Instead, he believes in ending all life on Earth. Ikutsuki, in his ravings, says something about an event called the Fall, and before we can get in depth on it, Mitsuru's father shows up and saves the day by activating Deadeye, shooting Ikutsuki, who then slips, intentionally. Listen, I can't say that word. YouTube really doesn't like me thanks to Blank Dream, so ahem. Mitsuru's father also dies, because Ikutsuki shot him. They had a duel. As he's dying, Mitsuru has this scream that is absolutely gut-punching. Then, when she comes down from the cross, because Aegis is no longer controlled, she loves Makoto too much, Mitsuru then laments her father's death. According to Mitsuru, her father had truly stopped living after Tartarus emerged, and the threat of shadows appeared, because he had dedicated his life to ending it, even if it cost him his life. However, Mitsuru's entire motivation was to ensure that her father lived to see the Dark Hour eradicated. But she failed, and here he is, dead, with nothing having been accomplished. Makoto watches this display blankly. It's exactly what he felt when Shinji died. It's how he felt when Pharos left. Makoto is unable to give any of these events meaning. When Shinji died, both Akihiko and Ken were able to strengthen their resolve and decide to keep moving forward and living for the sake of Shinji. But Makoto, he just lost his resolve. It's gone. Mitsuru's reaction even causes Makoto to remember a conversation he once had with Pharos. A conversation where Pharos said the following: "At the end of the day, we're all alone in this world. Why bother getting close to others? It only means that you'll be hurt when you lose them. No matter how much you cherish something, once it's gone, that's the end of it. So it's better to never have anything at all. You don't need anything. You don't want anything." And Makoto truly believes this now, watching the pain in Mitsuru and knowing the pain and guilt he himself felt when Shinji died. The emptiness he felt after Pharos left. This is blatantly stated a few scenes after the death of Mitsuru's father. Everyone returns to the dorms, and Makoto decides instead of sleeping, he'll walk into town. There he is introduced to Ryoji. Not that one. Not with the U, this one with an O. The mole. But we're not going to talk about him right now. We'll talk about him in a bit. As he's walking, he encounters Aegis, who, despite the injuries and in desperate need of repair, she affirms that she will always be by his side. But Makoto's response is just, "But you'll abandon me too someday." Aegis affirms that she won't, even going as far as to say, "I will not leave you by yourself. I am sure that is the reason I was granted this eternity of time." but Makoto can't really comprehend it. He embraces her, but he doesn't hear her. He chooses to regress further, closing himself off from everyone, acting reminiscent of his initial self in the first movie, where he apathetically followed whatever path laid out before him. Except now, he's actively choosing to not form any meaningful connections. He doesn't yearn for them like before, but even in this state, he retains his kindness, such as when he sees famous Persona 3 social link character Tanaka pestering famous Persona 3 social link character Maiko. He grabs Tanaka's wrist and tells Maiko to go home, because he thought something not so nice was about to happen between this sleazy businessman and small child. Thankfully though, that is not what was going to happen, but Makoto does accidentally tear Tanaka's suits and now needs to pay for repairs, resulting in him getting a job at a cafe. And hey, would you look at that, new kid Ryoji is here, and he decides to get a job at that same cafe in order to help Makoto earn double money. And yeah, that's the reason. Ryoji has met Makoto about 3 times before this, and he just decides to help him, resulting in the two becoming friends over the course of the next half an hour, as Ryoji helps Makoto reopen his heart once more, because Makoto, the introvert, has finally been adopted by an extrovert. The pair have really good chemistry with each other, and Makoto is willingly being dragged along by Ryoji as they embark on money-making schemes in order to help Makoto pay back Tanaka, and it's really great. There's even this really cute moment where after Makoto finishes counting money, he reaches out and grabs Ryoji's hand without thinking. Then Makoto just stares at his own hand, marveling at how he did that. It was instinct. His body moved before he thought. And that is just friendship goals. And friendship is what Ryoji and Makoto forge as Ryoji comes to understand Makoto clearly. They have a conversation that I want you, the viewer, to keep in mind. This will become relevant. Right here, when they are washing dishes, Ryoji says, "I think I understand you now. You're afraid of losing people, aren't you? That's why you avoid getting attached to others. You're completely off, you know. Even if you lose someone, the bond you shared with them is never lost. Keep that in the back of your mind. I'll come back to it. I promise." We'll be skipping ahead as this part of the film is mainly full of hijinks and fun-loving moments as the school field trip to Kyoto occurs. I love this part of the film, it's really funny and has gems like...
A few moments later.
Makoto-san.
And there's even a very tense war drama as Makoto, Akihiko, Junpei, and Ryoji fight for their goddamn lives trying to escape what might as well be no man's land, but ultimately they fail, and it results in their execution. I am not joking. Watch the film. It's adorable, and it reminds the viewer that Persona 3 is not about death and sadness, but about life and happiness. Plenty of cute stuff happens, but we can't dwell on this because we need to jump to the film's climax. After Seize returns from the trip to Kyoto, they discover that Chidori has been abducted by Strega. Chidori was captured by Seize after the fight on the bridge, and has been in a hospital while getting closer to Junpei. They are very cute. Junpei gets a lot of character in this film, and during the film's climax, he is definitely the protag. Seize pursues Chidori, and Fuka manages to locate her, finding her at the foot of Tartarus during the dark hour. There she engages Seize in a 1-on-7, but Junpei orders Seize to stop fighting her. He is going to face her alone. Chidori as a character is apathetic. Chidori lives knowing that she will eventually die from illness. But gradually through her interactions with Junpei, that changed. She started feeling things. She started looking forward to seeing Junpei. However, when Takaya and Jin got her out of the hospital, they reminded her that she has nothing to look forward to in life, telling her that she will not live very long and will leave Junpei. This causes her to return to Strega's side and fight Seize in order to sever her connection to Junpei and die. She says she is not afraid to die, However, Junpei still cares about her, and this is why he asks to fight her alone, because he doesn't want her to get hurt. Junpei even refuses to attack her. Throughout their fight, Chidori reveals that she used to not feel fear. She was never afraid, because she lived with death as an absolute truth. But once Junpei got in her life, she began to feel fear. Fear of something. This fear was not of death. She began to feel fear of attachment, because as she says to Junpei, I fear that once I grow attached to something, I'll lose it, be it to things, my own life, or anything else. That's why we need to live only for the moment. But you brought me pain I never asked for. As she says this, Chidori launches barrage after barrage of attacks at Junpei, but he doesn't stop. He keeps moving forward until he embraces her, telling Chidori that he feels the exact same way. He is scared of losing her, but to him, that means they have to be together to prevent the other from feeling alone. Together, they can shoulder the fear they have, and Makoto watches this interaction, learning from it. He, with a small smile, remarks, I see. I guess that makes sense. And then Junpei is shot. Two-thirds of Strega emerge, leading to C's engaging them. Chidori sacrifices herself to revive Junpei and dies in his arms. Meanwhile, Makoto battles Strega with all of his heart. In his mind, he hears Pharos telling him his whole "in the end, all of us are alone" speech. But during the battle, Makoto rebukes each point. At the end of the day, we're all alone in the world. That's not true. Why bother getting close to others? It only means you'll be hurt when you lose them. That's not true! No matter how much you cherish something, once it's gone, that's the end of it. So it's better to never have anything at all. No, it's not! You don't need anything. I do! You don't want anything. I really do. I'm tired of running from getting close to others. Giving Makoto the strength and resolve to secure the W, forcing Strega to retreat. Though Chidori has died, Junpei and the rest of C's don't wallow in despair. They look forward to the future. Junpei even says he's glad he fell in love with Chidori, to which Makoto smiles. Time skips forward a month. Most of this film took place across like 10 days in November, and we are now in December 6th, where Ryoji and Makoto are hanging out on the roof of the dorm, listening to a famous Persona 3 song, Burn My Dread, Last Battle, which is cute and really good foreshadowing for the eventual fates of these two characters. However, when the moon fully rises, Ryoji has a headache and decides to leave early, while Makoto goes to bed. Ryoji's headaches lead to him traveling towards the Moonlight Bridge, the bridge where C's fought and defeated the final full moon shadow at the start of the film. As he approaches the bridge, the dark hour arrives, and yet he still keeps moving towards the bridge as memories begin to flood into him. Makoto awakens as the dark hour begins, having received a mind message from Elizabeth, something about a terrible presence awakening on this night. And just like Ryoji, memories begin to flood into his mind, flashes of some horrible being at the Moonlight Bridge. Instantly he gets to his feet, because he never took his uniform or his shoes off, and books it to the bridge, running. When Ryoji arrives at the bridge, he is met by Aigis. She claims they have met before. She claims Ryoji is her enemy. She knows what Ryoji is. Ryoji is Death, the 13th full moon shadow that Aigis defeated and sealed away 10 years ago on this very bridge. Aigis attacks Ryoji. An unknown amount of time passes until Makoto arrives, being met with this scene. Persona 3, the movie, Winter of Rebirth. Unlike the prior movies, this film begins where it left off, with Makoto at the Moonlight Bridge, except he's not with Ryoji. He's in a memory. He's remembering something from his youth, which is evident through the shorts that Makoto is wearing and how he is small. Makoto looks around and sees fire. Then there's a woman inside the wreckage of a burning car. She says something, but Makoto can't remember what. Though before the woman is consumed by the flames of the wreck, she smiles. Shortly afterwards, little Makoto witnesses some kind of battle unfold between two figures. One is revealed to be Aigis, who seemingly won the battle, albeit suffering extensive damage. She carries what we later learn to be the essence of death in her palm. She then seals it away inside the young Makoto, who by mere chance happened to be there on that night after surviving a car crash and witnessing his mother's demise. As we return to reality, Seize arrives because they sensed a shadow, who they now realize is Ryoji. Ryoji goes on to explain that he is a manifestation of death, the 13th Arcana. Every time Makoto and Seize defeated a full moon shadow, the shadow's essence flowed into Makoto, who was basically nurturing Ryoji, Pharos at the time. They are one and the same. Ryoji was never human. However, this entire time, Makoto is yelling at Ryoji to stop. He is trying to assert the friendship they had and the humanity he sees in Ryoji, because he does not want to lose his friend. Ryoji says that as much as he would like to, he can't. He has no choice but to fulfill his purpose as the bringer of the fall, an event that will kill every human being on the planet. And there is no stopping the fall, because death cannot be overcome. Seize tries to engage Ryoji, but they are powerless to even hurt them. They are tossed aside, and Ryoji demonstrates 1% of his power, launching an attack that utterly destroys the full moon bridge. Seize is left in shock and fear. However, he does tell Makoto that he doesn't want him or Seize to suffer. So on December 31st, he'll return and offer to let Makoto kill him, because if Ryoji dies by Makoto's hands, then all of Seize's memories of the Dark Hour and the approaching end of the world will vanish. They will be able to live their lives in ignorant bliss, unable to feel any of the approaching anxiety until the fall occurs and kills them all. Because when the fall occurs, none of them will realize it. It will be a painless death that they won't even notice. Ryoji leaves. Time passes. When they spoke with Ryoji, it was December 6th. For the next 20 days and 30 minutes of movie, Seize lives their lives as shells of their former selves. They have nothing to do at this time, but wait for the inevitable. The color in these scenes are washed out or blanketed in white, giving them an apathetic and hollow vibe. The music is quiet and somber. Everyone here grapples with the god of fear, and instead of throwing him down into hell's fire, they themselves are overcome by their dread, failing to burn it. Ken lives in fear. Akihiko trains relentlessly, but without passion. Koromaru is sad. Junpei entertains a death wish. Yukari starves herself. Fuka weeps. Mitsuru tries to stay busy, and Aigis is in recovery. The entire time, Makoto contemplates the choice Ryoji left him with, because while he does have a choice, technically, it really isn't much of one. On December 26th, Makoto heads out to the Moonlight Bridge's ruins and contemplates Ryoji's offer, knowing that if he accepts it, he will be able to spare his friends from all the suffering they've endured the past 20 days. but at what cost? Makoto recounts his past year of his friends. Makoto begins to consider accepting Ryoji's offer, thinking that if he does, everyone will stay friends, and they'll be able to make new memories and have new experiences. They'll all go to a New Year's festival. Akihiko and Mitsuru will graduate. They'll celebrate. Everyone will live happily. But at the end of the fantasy, he realizes that the memories they'll make are limited, because when the fall comes, they won't realize it. Everything will come to an end without their knowledge, which is presented through the distortion of audio, the red specks symbolizing death. And then he remembers. He remembers what his mother told him as she burned to death in that car crash 10 years ago on the Moonlight Bridge. She told him, "Live." A simple phrase, and she smiled because at that moment she knew her son was safe. And that's why Ryoji was correct when he said he understood Makoto clearly and told him, "I think I understand you now. You're afraid of losing people, aren't you? That's why you avoid getting attached to others. You're completely off, you know. Even if you lose someone, the bond you shared with them is never lost." Makoto has always been afraid of losing people. His entire life, starting with the moment his mother died. Watching the life leave her as the flames consumed her instilled this fear in Makoto. He must have loved his mother very much, so much so that after her passing he was afraid of anyone else leaving him. Therefore, he sequestered himself, staying away from others, and foregoing connections, because he was afraid. It was a lonely life, but he wouldn't get hurt. Even still though, he longed for human connection. He became starved for it by the events of the first movie, but once he acquired it after joining C's, he didn't know how to react or handle any of it. He didn't have social skills, but when he realized that he cared about them, he rode into action on that motorcycle to save them, because he couldn't bear to part with anyone for any reason. It's what he dreads. It's why he has always cared. By this point, Makoto knows he values his friends, and he prioritizes them above all else. But he is afraid to speak up, and now he must speak up on their behalf to answer Ryoji's offer. There is no fighting. This is something he has to do with his words. This is his ultimate social test, but he can't make it. This is where Elizabeth, famous Persona 3 character from the Velvet Room that I have never mentioned until now, appears. She arrives and asks Makoto to give her a tour of Tatsumi Port Island, because it'll be a nice change of pace for him, and Makoto agrees to. He takes her to every significant location in town, and Elizabeth has fun. It brings back joy into this film, the joy of living. This film has been pretty depressing and bleak up till now.
Yay! 出られません。かなりの技量を必要とするようですね。
We love Elizabeth here. For the final location of the tour, Elizabeth asks to see Makoto's dorm. As they stand in front of the building, Elizabeth says that the day she spent with Makoto was unforgettable, and that she will treasure these memories like sparkling gems. Then she asks Makoto how he enjoyed spending his year at the dormitory with C's. Makoto thinks long and hard, closing his eyes, recounting all the good, all the bad, all the suffering and sadness, each failure, each betrayal, the joy, the warmth he felt, the connections, the bonds he forged, the minor inconveniences, the little moments of happiness, everything. With it all in mind, he finally gets it. He tells Elizabeth that they need to return to where it all began. He can finally put it into words. Meanwhile, the rest of C's is at their absolute lowest. Mitsuru looks through her father's empty study. Ken sits alone, yelling at Koromaru that he can't feed him, and it doesn't matter anyway. Akihiko curses his inability to do anything, just like all those years ago. Fuka sits alone, trying to see if she can speak to anyone. She can't. Yukari sits vacant. Junpei lies vacant. Makoto returns to the ruins of the Moonlight Bridge, now with full context on what happened 10 years ago. He then delivers what I like to call his eulogy to himself, stating, 10 years ago, ever since that accident, I don't think I was really alive. But after coming to the city and spending time with my friends, that's how, for the first time, I think I was able to start living. At that moment, the sun begins to rise, casting away the gloom and despair. Simultaneously, Seize finds their resolve. Mitsuru discovers that her father kept a special wine that he had planned to share with her when she came of age, and according to Kikuno, the maid from Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, he never stopped looking forward to it, mentioning it to her regularly before he died, proving that he never gave up looking towards the future, which Mitsuru needs to follow in. Fuka realizes that she can talk to her friends. They are willing to listen. She shouldn't be afraid. Akihiko and Ken find their resolve through Shinji, realizing that even though Shinji was dying and struggling in vain the entire time he was with them, he never gave up. And because of that, they cannot afford to not struggle in vain. Because as Ken says, living is just as hard as dying. Yukari realizes that her father loved her and wanted her to take care of herself. She can't throw her life away by accepting the fall. While Junpei, after collapsing in the snow, feels the warmth of Chidori's hand. Seeing a flower she once planted has now grown into some lovely flowers, remembering that he promised to live for both of them. So who is he to throw that life away? He needs to at least try. Returning to Makoto, we see him genuinely smile. His heart is fully in it. Every smile before, all 3 or 4 of them, I think. Those prior smiles were only slight, but now, after coming to understand that while attachment can be scary and it does risk losing people, he can't close himself off. He needs to look forward to the future. He needs to be confident, stand tall and straight, and enjoy what he has. He has finally overcome his fear. He is going to live. December 31st rolls around. Ryoji returns. He and Makoto speak in Makoto's bedroom. It's nostalgic, because they used to have chats in here when Ryoji was Pharos. As they speak, Makoto is noticeably different. He looks Ryoji in the eye, speaks in full sentences, and shows determined kindness. Even when Ryoji transforms into a partial form of death, Makoto still faces him with a smile on his face, glad to be able to speak with Ryoji one final time. No longer afraid of losing him, he can accept that. Ryoji leaves on amicable and peaceful terms, but not before telling Seize that if they really do want to try and avert the fall, their best bet is on January 31st, at the top of Tartarus. He will be there. Once Ryoji's gone, Seize realizes that even if they do manage to avert the fall, it might result in all of them losing their memories. So they promise to meet up on the day of Akihiko and Mitsuru's graduation. They'll gather on the rooftop of Gekkoukan High and enjoy the view of the cherry blossoms in spring. Everyone agrees to meet up, and this was Makoto's idea. He steps forward as their leader, full of confidence, ready to face what comes next, no matter the odds, no matter what he may lose. We now skip to January 31st. Seize ascends the final floors of Tartarus, all while mass destruction, reincarnation, plays in the background, slaying normal shadows left and right. But there's too many of them, and Makoto needs to reach the top of Tartarus, so they split up. Mitsuru, Yukari, Ken, and Koromaru stay on the lower levels to finish off the shadows so no one gets overwhelmed. They are on a time crunch. Makoto, Akihiko, Aigis, and Junpei ascend to the next levels, where they encounter Jin and Takaya of Strega. Makoto slips past them while the remaining three stay to defeat Strega. Alone, Makoto reaches the top of Tartarus. There he encounters Ryoji, now having been transformed into Nick's avatar, the bringer of the fall. Soon he will enact the end of all life when he makes contact with the moon. He is an entity that cannot be stopped, something that cannot be resisted. But even knowing that, Makoto draws his evoker, and the battle begins. Burn My Dread, Last Battle is playing. Makoto fights, but he just doesn't stand a chance. Every attack he makes is parried. Every persona he summons falls. Every attack Nick's avatar, every attack Ryoji throws at him narrowly avoids killing him. Makoto isn't fighting recklessly. He's on the defensive throughout the fight. He can't win. By the end of this first bout, he's on the ground, surrounded by rubble, laying on his back. However, Ryoji looks down at Makoto's seemingly beaten body and wonders something. How is Makoto still alive? Ryoji is supposed to be absolute and absurdly powerful. How is Makoto still alive? It's simple, and Makoto realizes why. Because there are parts of Nick's avatar that are still Ryoji despite the new form. The part of Ryoji that was Makoto's friend is resisting. It's hesitating. Because Ryoji does not want to hurt Makoto. And these feelings give Makoto a second wind as their bond fuels him. Makoto uses the latent power left by Ryoji to summon Thanatos. Giving him the strength to challenge Ryoji and go on the offensive. With Thanatos, Makoto attacks recklessly and wild, like an animal desperate to live. And can I just say, Self-Determination, the song playing for this fight, is stupendous, culminating in this glorious verse. But sadly, it just wasn't enough. It was close. Really close. The rest of Seas emerges victorious from their battles, arriving in time to witness the beginning of the fall. As the moon begins to fall towards the earth, it opens its eyes. Ryoji ascends to the moon to merge with it. Gravity increases and Seas is rendered helpless, as the general populace of the world begins to transform into shadows. These shadows then ascend Tartarus and attempt to consume everyone. Seeing this, Makoto lets out one final, desperate scream, practically begging for an answer. Some way to end this and save everyone, even if it costs him his life. As he does this, he speaks with Ryoji one final time. Ryoji says that Makoto has arrived at the answer of life. He has found something he wants to protect, even if he has to sacrifice himself. And now that he has acquired the answer, he is owed a power that will make any impossible thing possible. Returning to reality, Makoto rises and draws his evoker, summoning both Thanatos and Orpheus, fusing them into Messiah, his ultimate persona. He has been reborn. His growth has come full circle as he is surrounded in light, standing tall. He holds his head up and embraces what is to come. Every shadow is eradicated. Then he turns to look at Aigis warmly and tells her to live. With a smile on his face, he then begins to ascend, flying into the air, directly into the moon to confront the fall head on. He arrives at the core of the moon. He engages the moon's core, which is death. The literal concept of death. Death launches an attack called Death with the effect of instant death, and Makoto endures it. Time and time again this attack is launched. But Makoto stands, shambling forward because though he may stand alone, he is not lonely. Everyone is calling out to Makoto, sending him their support, giving him the strength to accomplish the impossible. He defeats death by invoking the power of the universe. With the fall averted, the Dark Hour is destroyed, and Seas loses their memories of the Dark Hour, and their memories of the bond they had forged. Time skips to March 5th, and Makoto regains his memories after catching a glimpse of Aigis. Then, during the school graduation ceremony, Makoto ditches it and heads up to the roof of Gekkokan. Though when he gets there, he's exhausted. He's about to fall over. He barely made it up those stairs. In fact, he's incredibly pale. But when he reaches the roof, the color shifts, becoming vibrant, soft, reminiscent of the beach escapades at Tatsumi Port Island. They finally return to the golden days of Seas. They return to the joy of living. Makoto is now in a state of true happiness. He embraces Aigis, but shortly crumbles. He's weak. We then see him resting on Aigis' lap, calmly listening as Aigis embraces the humanity she has learned on this journey, which he too has learned. He has learned what it means to truly live. He has discovered his reason for life. It was in the smaller moments. Spending time with everyone in the Dark Hour was nice, but all he ever cared about was being around others, and now he can easily and freely do that. Or well, he can be happy for the future he bought them. Then Aigis tells Makoto to get some rest, because his friends will be here soon, and he deserves it. As Makoto begins to close his eyes, he turns his head and sees his friends running towards him. Ascending the stairs, as his eyes shut, the camera zooms in, and we fade to credits as Memories of You, Kimi no Kyoko, begins to play. Across these 4 films, we watch Makoto grow from a naive and socially awkward boy who was afraid of making attachments into a young man who is ready to face the unknown no matter the circumstances, becoming someone who has opened their heart and can speak amicably with others, and most importantly is able to accept that all of his friends will leave. Everything comes to an end after all, allowing him to accept that he has to leave them and accept his own death. This rebirth is able to happen because Makoto is an astute character and someone who is always learning, observing the people around him and mimicking them. This is shown through the influence Fuka in the first movie, Takaya throughout the second movie, Chidori and Ryoji in the third film. These characters had profound impacts on Makoto and gave him the impetus for growth, both positively and negatively. If you can't tell, I do think Makoto Yuki is a wonderful character, and I hope I did at least a half-decent job at illustrating that. These films are, of course, not perfect. They've got a few flaws with pacing, like movies 2 and 3 kind of start abruptly. Some characters, I feel, aren't handled particularly well, like Yukari and Mitsuru. Both of them seem a wee bit undercooked. Neither of them ever really gets the spotlight, and the big moments the two have in the games are just more effective in the games and kind of half-hearted in the films. Personally though, my biggest gripe with the film's changes is the ending, even if it's minor. In the movie, when Makoto is closing his eyes, he sees his friends approaching, whereas in the game, he never does. He only hears them approach and smiles, taking solace in that alone, which I think is much more poignant. However, there's plenty of changes in the film that I really enjoy, like Shinji and Ken. Shinji himself has such a powerful presence throughout the remaining 2 films. It was such a good change that Persona 3 Reload adapted the movie's interpretation of Shinji's death rather than the one from the original Persona 3. Just look at this comparison.
What is the meaning of this? Why would you risk your life to save this child?
楽におなりなさい。
Mom.
So yeah, these films can give you a Persona 3 experience, though Reload is certainly the definitive way to experience P3 now. Sorry FMC, but she kind of irrelevant. Anyway, I love Persona 3. It is in my top 3 games of all time, and did genuinely change my life. Frankly though, I'm just glad this video was complete. I said at the start of this one that the video was delayed, and that's very true. I originally planned to publish this one on March 3rd or 5th, but scripting was hell. Thankfully though, I decided to scrap that first version and spent more time talking to dear friends of mine, leading to this version of the script, and this version is nearly 30 pages long. At least I got this video published around March 31st, close enough to another important P3 day. You know the answer. I also want to mention that all the music for these films are stellar. Like One Determination, Self-Determination, My Testimony, and Daily Life are all incredible. If you like the P3 soundtrack or Reload soundtrack, check them out, they're very good. Speaking of music, I need to thank Dan Garlock Music, who gave me permission to use his wonderful English covers of My Testimony and Kimi no Kyoko, which I believe should be playing about nowish. His music does very much rock, so dear viewers, please check him out. Also, special thanks to my friends who made this harder by distracting me. I am looking you in the eye, Maya. I have been a Zaman, and if you don't hate my voice, then please consider subscribing to my channel and liking the video. I have way more video ideas, so stick around. Plus, my sole goal here is to improve my writing, editing, and speaking. Thank you very much.
You fought the night to save the day, gave us a chance to find a way. Moments are fleeting, you took the lead, and now we're here. Rest up for now and disappear, never be forgotten. Can you see what you're meant to be? Surrounded by our love through all eternity. No need to fear the coming days, we will be here to take the reins. I know one thing is true, as I recall your joy and pain when all your friends had a feast that never get to see you. Look me in the eye, this isn't a goodbye. I'll love you until my life is exhausted. Treasure the past, the fun we had, fighting is one. We had a blast, strong together, never letting go, never let go. Shouldn't be surprised after all this time that it was ending. Even when you're gone, time will move on, but I will hold out. I will embrace the feeling. Sometimes in life we fade apart. Deep down inside I feel my heart beating much faster. Thinking of you, thinking of you, thinking of you. After comes around, now I have realized never alone. Always should have known, 'cause I will never ever